I remember the way the morning sun poured into our kitchen on Willow Lane, like liquid gold washing over the terracotta tiles. My mother used to hum old Bollywood songs while the smell of chai and cardamom toast filled the air, and my father read the newspaper by the window, always in that same worn chair with the cracked leather armrests. If you saw us then, me, my parents, and my younger sister, you'd have thought we were the perfect suburban family. The kind of family that framed their vacation photos and kept fresh flowers on the dining table. My name is Ayan, by the way. I'm not the daughter in the story, but I was there through every bitter moment of it. I'm telling it because she won't. Because she thinks silence is strength. Maybe she's right, but I think some truths deserve to be dragged into the light, even if they burn a little. She was my cousin. Same age as me. Let's call her Leena. Leena lived in that house with her parents, my aunt and uncle, and her little sister, Ria. Her father, Uncle Rajiv, was the kind of man people called proud, though what they meant was impossible to please. Her mother, Auntie Meena, had a voice that could slice through glass and a gaze that weighed and measured every person she met. But in public, they were charming. Warm. The type who hosted Diwali parties with handmade sweets and lit candles all the way down the driveway. They lived well. Not rich, but curated. Everything in the house was chosen with care. Neutral color palettes, sleek furniture, embroidered throw pillows flown in from Delhi. Even their fights, because, of course, there were fights, were conducted in whispers, behind shut doors and thick walls. Their life had the polish of a magazine spread, but underneath that surface, it was different. But we didn't know that yet. Not really. Leena and I were always close, especially when we were younger. We were both the eldest, both bookish, both always expected to set the example. We used to ride bikes down the empty cul-de-sac, race to the big oak tree on the corner, and trade ghost stories during family gatherings. I thought we'd grow up and never drift. But time has a cruel way of pulling people apart. It started subtly. At birthday parties, her sister got more gifts. During dinners, her parents asked Ria about school and dance class while Leena served dessert without being asked. I noticed, but didn't say anything. Not then. Because she didn't say anything either. She just smiled that small, unreadable smile of hers and kept moving. I wish I had paid more attention. Because what they did to her didn't happen all at once. It was slow, like a rope tightening around her neck, inch by inch. But for a long time, all you could see from the outside was a picture-perfect family. And that's how it begins. Every Sunday, without fail, they hosted brunch. Not the lazy, scrambled eggs and leftovers kind of brunch, but the kind with cloth napkins and mango lassi served in cut crystal glasses. Aunt Meena would dress in pale pastels and gold bangles that chimed like wind chimes when she walked. Uncle Rajiv ironed his shirts to perfection, always with a watch on his wrist, even when there was nowhere urgent to be. They had a reputation to maintain, and they wore it like tailored suits. Leena, of course, was always there, already working before guests arrived. She'd be setting the table, slicing papaya just so, and arranging silverware at exactly the right angle. Ria would float in near the end, still towel-drying her hair, her eyeliner somehow flawless. Their parents never said anything, but the contrast was so sharp it might as well have been carved into the walls. Ria, beta, come sit. Try the paratha before it gets cold, Aunt Meena would say, pushing the best pieces onto her plate. Leena? She ate standing in the kitchen, half listening through the doorway. When people visited, they praised the family's wonderful girls. How lucky they were. How well-mannered, how lovely. Aunt Meena would beam and shake her head like it was all too much, but you could see the pride in her posture. Ria always lit up at the attention. She was magnetic that way. People gravitated toward her. She could turn a story about buying shampoo into an adventure. Leena, though, was quieter, more precise. She didn't demand the spotlight, and as a result, it rarely found her. Still, they played the game. The parents smiled. The girls posed for pictures. The house glowed with that curated warmth. Behind the scenes, the rules were different. Ria never had to clean up, not really. She could drop a dish, shatter it on the kitchen floor, and Aunt Mina would cluck her tongue like it was a small price to pay for beauty. Leena once left a damp towel on the bathroom floor and didn't hear the end of it for 3 days. Uncle Rajiv, for his part, was harder to read. He wasn't loud, wasn't violent, but his expectations were precise. Merciless. A 90 on an exam? Could have been 95. A drawing award from school? That's not a real achievement, Leena. He never said it with venom. Just disappointment. And sometimes that's worse. Still, to the outside world, they were perfect. A family that smiled at the temple, brought laddus to neighbors during holidays, and posted carefully chosen family photos with matching outfits and filtered lighting. It all looked so seamless. And if you asked Leena back then how things were, she would have said, fine. Always just fine. I didn't know what lived behind that word until much later. At the time, I believed it. We all did. If you walked through their house on any given afternoon, you'd think you stepped into a catalog. The living room was pristine. Cream-colored couches no one ever actually sat on, throw blankets folded with military precision, the air always carrying the scent of sandalwood and imported fabric softener. Family portraits lined the hallway in perfect symmetry, every year updated with seasonal outfits. Autumn leaves. Spring florals. Diwali saris. Ria, always at the center, her head tilted just enough to look effortless. Leena, a little more reserved, always to the side, always smiling, but never quite the same smile. They had a rhythm. A routine. Ria's schedule dictated the household, dance classes, piano lessons, endless rehearsals for pageants and showcases that somehow always required new outfits, new shoes, new everything. And Leena? She was the one making flashcards for her physics midterms while driving Ria to rehearsals, the one sewing sequins onto costumes late at night because the tailor didn't understand the vision. She never complained. Or maybe we just didn't hear her. When Ria got sick before a recital once, nothing serious, just a fever, Leena stayed up all night making sure her sister had soup, fresh towels, even mint water for her sore throat. Aunt Mina boasted about how Ria pushed through and danced anyway, but never mentioned who made sure she could stand on her feet the next morning. Still, there were moments of closeness between the sisters. Childhood ones. I remember catching them giggling over an inside joke, their heads bent together on the couch, sharing headphones. But those moments got fewer as they grew older. Somewhere along the way, admiration turned into expectation. And Leena turned into a shadow walking behind the golden girl. I think back to one of those family dinners. I was sitting across the table from Leena. Ria had just come back from winning another local dance competition, a small tiara still perched in her hair. The whole table buzzed about it, how elegant she looked, how confident she was. Aunt Mina declared she was destined for something truly great. Leena's plate sat untouched. Her nails were bitten down to the skin. She used to do that during exam weeks. I noticed her looking at the trophy, then quickly away. You'll have your moment too, I said quietly, nudging her foot under the table. She looked up, surprised. Then smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Sure, she said. Someday. I didn't understand it then. I thought she was being dramatic. Jealous, maybe. That's what Aunt Mina always muttered when Leena's mood got too quiet. But now, looking back, I think that was the first time I saw the crack in her armor. The first time I realized she wasn't okay. That was the last year things were still quiet. Still controlled. The next year, everything changed. Leena was 5 when Ria was born. She told me once that she didn't remember the day clearly, just the way the house went quiet and loud at the same time. There were whispers in the kitchen, phone calls in hushed voices, and a trail of aunties arriving with gifts and soft congratulations, like it was royalty, not just a baby, that had arrived. At first, it was excitement. Leena was told she'd be a big sister, Aditi. Everyone made it sound like a promotion. A new role. She was promised responsibility, importance. But what they meant, what they never said, was that her spotlight was over. Ria came home wrapped in pink satin and wide-eyed stares. Her crib was imported. her name stitched into baby blankets. The first photo of her took center frame on the mantel, displacing the one of Leena's kindergarten graduation. No one said it was a replacement, but the mantel only had room for one. "She's so fair." Aunt Mina beamed, holding her new daughter like a prize. Such delicate features. Like a little film star. Uncle Rajiv couldn't stop smiling either. He started calling her Mary Rani, my queen, before she could even walk. Leena used to hover near the edge of the room during all this, unsure where to stand. She tried helping. Tried being useful. But the compliments that used to be tossed her way like treats were now fully rerouted. The guests only noticed the baby. The photos shifted. The praise shifted. The tone of the house shifted. And slowly, so did the rules. Before Ria, Leena could get away with AB on her math test if she aced her science. After Ria, every flaw became magnified. Every mistake a mark against her value. Aunt Mina started using phrases like, "You're the older one, act like it, and you should be setting an example." Except the example was never good enough. Because Ria was always better. Prettier. Lighter. More graceful. Even as a toddler, she was treated like she had already achieved something simply by existing. Leena, on the other hand, had to earn everything. By age 7, Leena was packing her own lunches. By 10, she was cleaning up after Ria's messes. And by 12, she was helping with homework she never got help with herself. The house revolved around Ria, her moods, her needs, her performances. And Leena? She became infrastructure. Necessary but invisible. I remember one day in particular. I was over during Ganesh Chaturthi. The house smelled like incense and sweet modaks. Ria, maybe 4 at the time, was throwing a tantrum about her lehenga being itchy. Aunt Mina cooed and peeled it off her, letting her run around in leggings and a t-shirt. Leena stood beside me in full traditional dress, hair tied, tikka perfect, posture straight. She didn't complain. She never did. "She looks beautiful, doesn't she?" Aunt Mina asked the room, beaming at Ria. Everyone nodded. I glanced at Leena. She didn't even flinch. Just said softly, "I ironed that lehenga for her this morning." That was the moment I started watching differently. Listening harder. Because sometimes, it's not about what people say. It's about how loudly they don't say it. And in that house, the silence around Leena was deafening. By the time Leena turned 17, Ria had already become the star of the family. She wasn't just favored anymore, she was curated. Groomed. Positioned for display. Everything about her life was documented and praised. The way she danced, the friends she had, the boy who gave her roses during Navratri. It was like watching someone get cast in the lead role of a play where everyone else was just set dressing. Even Leena. Especially Leena. Uncle Rajiv used to joke that he was saving for Ria's wedding since the day she was born. It wasn't really a joke. The family had opened a savings account in her name before she could read, and every bonus, every gift from relatives, every extra rupee from side contracts or stock wins was funneled toward it. For her future, they said. She's going to marry well. Leena once asked, offhandedly, if she had one too, a savings account. Aunt Mina just blinked at her like she'd asked something ridiculous. "Your future is up to you, Beta," she said. "You're the independent one." That became their favorite excuse. "You're strong. You're mature. You don't need all this attention, you're not a child." It was always framed like a compliment, but the result was the same. Leena got less. Less help. Less praise. Less investment. Her independence wasn't a choice, it was a sentence. Meanwhile, Ria's life was a photo shoot. Every milestone was celebrated. Her 16th birthday party was held at a resort with a chocolate fountain and a DJ. Leena's 18th? She made her own cake. No one even posted about it. I remember sitting with her that night. The house was dark, everyone asleep. We were on the balcony, 2 cups of leftover chai going cold between us. She had this faraway look in her eyes as she tapped the frosting on her plate with a spoon. "They didn't even get candles," she said quietly. I had to light one from the junk drawer. I think it was a leftover Diwali diya. I didn't know what to say. Nothing would have fixed it. So I just sat with her, let the silence fill the space where the celebration should have been. It got worse after Ria turned 16. The comparisons started coming from outside the house too. Family, friends, neighbors, even teachers. Ria's so poised, they'd say. She'll be married by 21, mark my words. Someone once joked that Ria was going to be on magazine covers while Leena would be behind a desk writing emails. Leena laughed politely, but I saw the way her eyes shuddered. And then came the unspoken shame of Leena's singlehood. As she got older, the family stopped asking about college and started asking why she wasn't dating. Why she wasn't putting herself out there. Why she didn't dress like Ria. Why she wasn't more appealing. She's 5 years older and still unmarried, I overheard Aunt Mina say once, not knowing I was in the next room. What will people think? That's when I felt it, that cold, electric pulse of something dark starting to take root in the family. The beginning of a story I wouldn't fully understand until years later. Leena was no longer just ignored. She was becoming an embarrassment. A blemish on the family's perfect image. And I knew, deep down, that one day, they'd do something unforgivable. I just didn't know how far they were willing to go. Not yet. She found out through Instagram. Of all the ways to learn that your younger sister is getting married, a filtered story of a sparkling diamond ring and 2 champagne flutes clinking under fairy lights is, perhaps, the cruelest. Leena called me that night. It was after midnight. Her voice wasn't shaky. It was hollow. She's engaged, she said. No hello. No build-up. Just those 2 words, dropped like stones in a still pond. I said quietly. They didn't tell me, Ion. My own parents didn't call. My sister didn't call. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? Anything would have sounded like an excuse, and there were no excuses left. Ria was 21. Her fiancé, Rohan, came from a well-known family, clean-cut, degree from abroad, dad owned 3 dealerships. The moment the ring slid onto her finger, the family went into performance mode. Sangeet meetings. Jewelry fittings. Catering tastings. Aunt Mina sent out dozens of save-the-dates within a week. There were whispers of features in bridal magazines. A possible wedding segment for a local lifestyle channel. Leena waited for hers. An envelope. A phone call. A message. Anything. It never came. 2 weeks before the wedding, I asked her directly. Maybe they're planning to surprise you? She laughed. Not the bitter kind. Worse. The exhausted kind. The kind that comes from finally admitting a truth you've tried to deny for years. I'm not being surprised, she said. I'm being erased. 3 days later, the wedding website went live. Ria and Rohan, set to marry at the Saffron Orchid Hotel. ## our two forever. The site had their love story, high school sweethearts, reunited at a cousin's engagement, their honeymoon itinerary, Greece, of course, and a full list of events. Every name of the bridal party. Every table assignment. I searched. Twice. Leena's name was nowhere. She wasn't a bridesmaid. She wasn't on the guest list. She wasn't invited. When she confronted them, finally, cornered them in the kitchen one night, Aunt Mina didn't even flinch. Leena, she said, like the name itself was a burden. You know how these things are. Ria is younger than you. If people see you at the wedding, unmarried, it'll raise questions. Questions? Leena asked. Her voice was level. Controlled. You're older, Uncle Rajiv added. Still single. It's not a good look. A look. That's what she was to them. A look. An image problem. It was the first time she didn't cry in front of them. Didn't beg. Didn't argue. She just nodded. And walked away. She came to my apartment that night, wearing the same expression you see on people standing in the rubble of their homes after a fire. Not destroyed. Not screaming. Just stunned. Like she hadn't realized until that moment how much she'd lost. I'm done, she said. I believed her. I just didn't know what done really meant. The week leading up to the wedding was drenched in gold. Everything about it shimmered, at least on the surface. Ria's social media was a carousel of pre-wedding shoots and designer lehengas, of henna-stained hands and champagne flutes. Aunt Meena posted daily countdowns. Uncle Rajiv wore a different silk kurta in every photo. It was an avalanche of curated joy, carefully filtered and obsessively captioned. Hashtag our two forever. Hashtag our little princess. Hashtag Rajiv Kirani. Leena didn't post a thing. She spent that week with me, crashing on my pull-out couch. She didn't cry. She didn't rant. She didn't pace the room like I half expected. What she did was quieter, more unnerving. She organized her laptop files. She deleted old contacts from her phone. She rolled every article of clothing she packed with a kind of mechanical calm. I watched her move like a ghost, present, but unreachable. I asked her once, gently, "What are you thinking?" She was sitting at my kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. The steam had long since vanished. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she looked up at me with eyes I didn't recognize. They weren't angry. They weren't even sad. They were clear. "I'm thinking about how many times I made excuses for them," she said. Her voice was quiet, but steady. How many birthdays I let them forget. How many school events I went to alone. How many times I told myself it didn't matter when they compared me to her. I kept thinking, if I just achieve more, if I just try harder, they'll see me. She paused, took a breath. But they don't want to see me. Not as I am. The silence after that was heavy, almost sacred. I wanted to say something, some protest, some comfort, but I couldn't lie to her. Not now. Not when the truth was finally fully out in the open. They had erased her. From the guest list. From the family narrative. From the version of reality they wanted to present to the world. Later that night, she pulled out an old shoebox from her bag. It was battered, corners frayed from years of shifting under beds and on closet shelves. Inside were clippings, notes, tiny things. A printout of the first time she made honor roll. A dried flower from her graduation bouquet. A photo of her in her debate club blazer, standing in front of a trophy she won when she was 15. Things no one else had remembered. Things only she had held on to. "I used to think this box meant something," she said, turning a faded ribbon over in her fingers. "That if I kept enough proof, they'd eventually acknowledge it. That they'd see me." The next morning, the Mehendi celebration took over the family WhatsApp group. Photos of Ria's hands, of Uncle Rajiv dancing, of plates stacked high with sweets. Not one message to Leena. Not one word of inclusion. I saw her glance at the screen once, then flip her phone face down. That night, she took a long shower and came out with her hair still damp, curling slightly at the ends. She sat beside me on the couch, pulled a piece of paper from her notebook, and began to write something. She didn't explain. She didn't need to. I didn't ask. But I saw her smile, just barely. And that's when I knew. The silence wasn't her surrender. It was her planning. They never saw it coming. The morning of the wedding started like a dream, the kind you brag about to neighbors and distant cousins. Sunrise rituals, rose petals scattered down temple steps, silk-clad relatives bustling like bees in a honeycomb. Ria was already trending. Her Haldi photos had hit 1,000 likes before noon. Leena was 3 cities away by then. At least, that's what the family thought. I knew better. I watched her leave my apartment just after 5 a.m., hair pulled back, hoodie zipped, eyes sharp. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. She had planned it the way someone plans a heist, not a breakdown. There was no rage. No tears. Just precision. They had left the house practically empty that morning. Everyone had already moved to the venue, the Saffron Orchid Hotel, an opulent marble and gold monstrosity designed for people who wanted weddings to look like movie sets. But the family's house? Still home base. Still full of valuables. And, more importantly, still full of control. The family car, a silver SUV they used for everything from grocery runs to guest pickups, was parked in the driveway. The spare key still under the ceramic turtle by the porch, just as it had been for the last 10 years. Their phones, 4 of them, were sitting neatly in a charging basket by the kitchen, probably forgotten during all the last-minute scrambling. Leena knew they would be. She counted on it. She took the car. She took the phones. All of them. And then she took the wedding dress. It wasn't just any dress. It was the dress. Imported from Mumbai, custom-stitched with embroidered peacocks, hand-beaded borders, a silk train so long it needed 2 attendants to carry it down the aisle. It had its own garment bag, its own Instagram post, its own sacred place in a locked wardrobe. Except the lock wasn't hard to pick, not if you'd lived in that house your whole life. Not if you knew that the top drawer of Uncle Rajiv's desk still held a tiny flathead screwdriver from when Leena fixed his office chair. Not if you knew the exact angle to jiggle the latch without triggering the alarm. The moment the dress was gone, the wedding began to collapse, only no one realized it at first. Guests began arriving, confused when there were no parents at the entrance. Ria, already in hair and makeup, was pacing the bridal suite barefoot, wrapped in a silk robe, waiting for the dress to be delivered. She called. Again and again. No one answered, because no one had their phones. By noon, panic had bloomed into full-blown chaos. Uncle Rajiv was using the hotel landline, red-faced, trying to reach the driver. Aunt Leena was snapping at the wedding planner. Rohan's parents were making quiet, polite inquiries that carried the weight of judgment behind every syllable. And Ria was screaming. The dress was missing. The car was gone. No one could call anyone. And Leena? Leena was already halfway up the coast, driving with the windows down and the wedding dress folded neatly in the trunk like a relic in exile. She didn't laugh. She didn't gloat. She just drove, music low, eyes on the road, breathing steady for the first time in years. They would be humiliated. She knew that. She counted on that. The whispers would spread like oil on water. Where were the parents? Why wasn't the sister invited? Why did the bride have a panic attack in the bridal suite? And most importantly, why did she never make it to the altar? Because by the time they found a way to reach someone, anyone, the ceremony window had closed. The priest, double-booked, left. The planner, unpaid, packed up. The guests, bewildered, wandered out in groups, murmuring about omens and bad luck and family secrets. That night, while the house filled with voicemail pings and furious missed calls, Leena sat by the sea. The wedding dress hung from the back seat like a ghost. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. She felt free. The next morning, she signed the lease on a 1-bedroom apartment 2 hours away from the place she used to call home. It wasn't much, worn hardwood, beige walls that whispered every sound, a view of a parking lot, but it was hers. No footsteps overhead. No passive-aggressive notes on the fridge. No one walking in without knocking. Leena stood in the middle of that empty space, dropped her single duffel bag on the floor, and exhaled like she hadn't in years. I helped her move in. Not that there was much to bring. Just the essentials. A few books, some clothes, her old laptop, and a pair of ceramic mugs she'd kept hidden at home because Ria always borrowed, the ones she liked. She didn't bring anything from her old bedroom, not the childhood journals, not the dusty academic trophies, not even the hand-woven blanket her grandmother had given her. That place, that life, wasn't hers anymore. She left the wedding dress behind too. Folded it carefully back into its ornate bag, zipped it shut, and placed it in the trunk of the family SUV, still in her possession. She didn't throw it in the ocean. Didn't burn it. She just left it there, like a ghost sealed in fabric. Because sometimes revenge isn't about destroying the thing that hurt you, it's about reminding them you could have, but didn't. The first voicemail from Aunt Meena came the next evening. Leena, Beta, listen, we're all still emotional. What happened at the wedding was unexpected. But you've made your point, okay? Let's move past this. Call us. She didn't. Uncle Rajiv followed a day later. You're overreacting. You embarrassed us. You humiliated your sister. She hasn't stopped crying. Do you even understand what you've done to this family? Ria sent one message. Why? Leena stared at the screen for a long time that night. Not because she didn't have an answer, but because there were too many. She never replied. She didn't block them. That would have been too easy for them to twist. Instead, she let the messages pile up. Let them see the read receipts. Let them drown in their own silence. It was a kind of justice that didn't need raised voices or slam doors. A week later, She got a job. Entry-level marketing, small office, friendly coworkers who didn't ask about her family. She found a plant shop on the corner and started filling her apartment with life, succulents on the sill, ivy on the bookshelf. She adopted a cat and named him Button because he kept batting the light switches off. Slowly, the beige faded. The silence became soft instead of stifling. When I visited her after her first full month in the new place, she was wearing a loose sweatshirt and sipping tea she'd steeped in cardamom and cloves, something her mother used to do, but better. She looked tired, but not hollow. There was color in her face, something unspoken in her posture. A woman no longer bracing for impact. A letter came the next day, real paper, real ink. The envelope was cream-colored. Her name written in her father's hand. 6 paragraphs. 3 of them apologies. 3 of them demands. The last line read, "Come home. Your sister needs you." She folded the letter once, clean and precise, and dropped it into the trash. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply turned the bolt on the door, poured herself another cup of tea, and opened her window to let in the night air. The city was still buzzing. She was still healing. But this was the first chapter that belonged to her. And she wasn't giving it back. The family house didn't feel like a home anymore. That's what I heard from a distant cousin, one of those people who always knew too much about everyone else's life. She called me a week after the wedding fallout, voice low and gossipy, whispering details like they were too sacred to speak aloud. "Your aunt hasn't left the house in days," she said. "People keep calling, asking what happened, asking why the bride never walked down the aisle. They can't keep the story straight." Apparently, the official version had changed 4 times. First, it was a vendor delay. Then, a medical emergency. Then, some vague reference to personal matters. But none of the lies held up, not when half the city saw the chaos firsthand. Not when photos leaked. Not when whispers turned into posts and posts turned into comment threads. And still, Leena didn't respond. Not to the texts. Not to the letters. Not to the voicemail from Ria where she finally broke and said through tears, "I don't even know what I did. Just tell me. Just say something." But Leena had already said something. Loud and clear. On the day she made sure the wedding didn't happen. "Uncle Rajiv called me. Just once." "Ayan," he said, voice flat, "talk to her. Please. This isn't how families work." I should have hung up. But curiosity kept me there. Isn't it? Because for years, you treated her like a placeholder. A draft version of the daughter you actually wanted. His silence crackled through the speaker. Then, quietly, "We didn't mean to." "You didn't have to mean it," I said. "You just did it." Over and over. I didn't tell Leena about the call. She didn't want to hear it. She was building something new, piece by piece, in soft mornings and grocery runs and job applications. I watched her once, folding laundry on her tiny couch, humming some half-forgotten song from childhood. The kind of hum that used to go unnoticed in a house full of noise. But now, it was hers. Just like the keys in her pocket. Just like the silence on her phone. Meanwhile, Ria's engagement had quietly disappeared from her social media. No more ring photos. No more hashtag. The wedding account went private. Rumors spread about Rohan's family backing out permanently. Something about a red flag. Something about emotional instability. Ironic, considering who carried that label all those years. Aunt Meena stopped attending temple. Couldn't handle the stares. Uncle Rajiv grew quieter, less confident in the neighborhood gatherings where he used to hold court. They were unraveling. Not dramatically, but slowly. Precisely the way they had unraveled Leena for years, thread by thread, word by word, until there was nothing left but expectation and shame. Except this time, there was no Leena to absorb it. No Leena to patch the seams and pretend everything was fine. They were left with the echo of their own choices. And every time they reached for her, they touched only silence. It was a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic. No storm rolling in. No news headline announcing closure. Just a cool breeze slipping through the window of Leena's apartment as she stirred sugar into her coffee. She was wearing mismatched socks and a hoodie 2 sizes too big, humming to herself while her cat tried to steal a piece of her toast. This was what her life had become. Ordinary. Quiet. Hers. There were no screaming matches. No bombshell final confrontation. No triumphant monologue delivered across a courtroom floor. In the end, her revenge hadn't come with fire. It came with absence. And that absence left a scar deeper than any public humiliation ever could. Her family had stopped trying. Eventually, Aunt Mina sent one final email, a long, flowery thing about legacy and forgiveness, laced with a few last desperate barbs about how people are talking. Leena read it once. She didn't delete it. She archived it. Like an old receipt from a life she no longer subscribed to. Uncle Rajiv never reached out again. He had always been too proud to beg twice. And Ria? Ria posted a photo 6 months later, smiling, hair lighter, a vague caption about healing and growth beneath a carefully staged yoga pose. But there was no ring. No wedding. No our two forever. Just a filtered snapshot of someone trying to reassemble a life without the script she was promised. Leena didn't check the post. She didn't need to. By then, she was already living something better. She'd moved up at work. A quiet promotion, offered without drama, no fanfare. Just a closed-door meeting and a new title on her email signature. Her boss called her dependable. Her coworkers called her sharp. No one called her disappointing. She made new friends. The kind who showed up without needing to be impressed. Who didn't ask about her past because they were more interested in who she was now. She even went on a date or two. Nothing serious. Nothing perfect. But for the first time, she was choosing, not waiting to be chosen. And me? I watched it all. I stayed close. Quietly proud. Because I'd seen her at her lowest, and now I was watching her rise. One night, we sat on her balcony again, a year after the wedding that never was. The city glowed below us. Her hair was longer now. Her eyes softer. Do you ever think about them? I asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it anyway. She was quiet for a while. Then, without looking away from the skyline, she said, "Not really. And when I do, it's like remembering a language I don't speak anymore." That was it. That was the whole revenge. She didn't need them to apologize anymore. She didn't need them to suffer. She just needed to live a life so good, so full, so undeniably her own, that it made everything they took from her irrelevant. She didn't break the family. They broke themselves. All she did was stop bleeding for them. And in doing so, she finally became someone they could never touch again.